You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
How we doing, folks? Galen Clavio here. Welcome back to CrimsonCast. Scott Caulfield is with me. We are in the middle of opening week for IU football. We've got podcasts dropping left and right. We got new podcast series launching, all kinds of things going on here on the Back Home Network, and we are excited to be once again back in the swing of things with IU football. Scott, we've been leading up to this all summer and large parts of spring. It's great to be back. How you doing, my friend?
Dude, we're here. We're talking IU football. We get to pick games again. We're back, man. Getting on the train. It'll be weekly now. We talk Sundays. Like this is unequivocally the most excited I've been for a season ever. I mean, I think we were all excited for that 2021 season. But it was like, man, it's a tough way to start. We got to go to Iowa. Like we were all excited, but man, this is unreal. It's awesome. Let's go.
We're excited. This is going to be our official preview episode. We got other episodes that are coming out this week as well. We'll talk about all the programming a little bit later on. Wanted to start off by mentioning that we are part of the Back Home Network, of course. Brought to you by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. Home Field going to be touring all over the country this year in support of their mission of bringing the best apparel to you fans of college football. They will be here in Bloomington for the Illinois game weekend. We got some fun stuff planned with them for that. And, of course, you can use the code HOME23 to get 15% off your first order with Home Field Apparel. You can't do it in person in the store, but if you're in Bloomington this weekend for the Old Dominion game, right down the street from my office.
Go to Tracks.
Home Field at Tracks.
Yep.
A great little location that many of you have been to as alums or as students. Now being managed and offering home field apparel as well as some of the old traditional track stuff, including still vinyl in the back. So go down, check out Home Field at Tracks, and let them know that CrimsonCast sent you. We've been down there many times already here over the course of the first couple of weeks.
Yep. And try the code. I mean, I always say, try that code HOME23. Try it in person. See what happens. The worst thing to say is no.
They may throw you out, but if they do, let us know. No,
worse things have been done at Tracks than that. You're not getting thrown out.
Also, just a quick reminder, folks, we're on YouTube. Go to Back Home Network on YouTube. Just search for that. You can find all of our podcasts, not just here from CrimsonCast, but also all the other shows, both new and returning, that we have on the network this year. We'd love to have you in the YouTube audience. Again, Back Home Network, the easy search. You can get notified whenever we drop a new show. And oftentimes that's helpful for people because I use YouTube sometimes I use that just as my regular television at this point, Scott.
Yeah, I use YouTube TV, but yes, we're both there.
Yeah. So what we do on our normal introductory podcast for seasons, we've been doing this for longer than I can really count, Scott, is we go through the games. We talk about what we think is going to happen in those games. So we're going to dive in, talk about that today. We've also got a segment later on where we talk with Jeremy Gray, the associate athletic director, senior associate athletic director, about the Gameday experience. So a lot of different content. Scott, you wanted to start with something, though, in particular.
We have arrived. This is a clip from your last podcast with Taylor Lehman. Let's see how I can produce this as well.
I can't hear anything. Who's at Wisconsin? I'm curious who benefits more from transferring, Roman Hemby or Billy Edwards, who's at Wisconsin. It's probably going to be Roman Hemby just because I think clearly the structure around him is better at IU than what Edwards is going to have at Wisconsin. But
so you were talking about, transfers from Wisconsin to, transfer from Maryland to Wisconsin, transfer another running back, Hemby, to Indiana. And you said, not jokingly, like, I think the guy going to Indiana is going to be better because it's a better system around him than Wisconsin. This is the Wisconsin team that has, basically ended the Lynch era, like 73-3 or whatever that game was. Like a team that, we've never been in the echelons of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. But Wisconsin's always been that echelon above where it's like, man, I just hope we can be at a competing level. And I heard that. I had to take myself aback. It's like we are at a point where you can say with no hubris and just no joking that like we are a better system for a running back. Like just not even like maybe, you know, Randall L during the day. It's like, this is it's unbelievable that we're here, man. Because we're about to have a preview. We're going to do a lot of wins, but you said that and it just stuck with me. It's like, man, that's almost like a win. Like that's really something. We should start the year 1-0 with that.
And look, it's one of those things where the realities of the two situations are really, really fascinating to think about, because Wisconsin under Luke Fickell has just really struggled. They tried to install a new identity there, and it so runs counter to what Wisconsin identity has been historically. You know, they didn't have a disastrous season last year by Indiana standards. They were 5-7. They were 7-6 the year before, but it feels like Wisconsin just is adrift right now in terms of what they're trying to do. And I don't think anybody would put the Wisconsin offensive line set up right now and the Indiana offensive line set up, or the skill position players, and say that Wisconsin's in better shape than Indiana. Now, this is where Curt Cignetti and his staff have done a remarkable job right at the beginning of instilling a new culture, getting these players in, developing them properly. We still have to see if they can sustain that. But man, on paper right now, just looking at what came back and looking at how it plays out, you know, in relation to everybody else, it does feel like that's where things are at. So I didn't say that lightly, and I did in the back of my mind think, did I just really positively compare IU football to Wisconsin football? And look, Wisconsin's resilient. I have no question they'll come back, but I think Indiana's going to be right in that echelon as we move forward.
Yep, no, totally agree. And I think the other thing that you've said a couple of times is, you know, there's no reason for fans at this point to have guarded expectations, or you phrase it differently, but like I'm going to take that definitely into account as I do my season preview. Like there's no point for me to be concerned or worried. Like just enjoy this and enjoy the ride.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much of this is a process that could be linear. And this is kind of the theme of this show, I think. It's like, and I'm going to go on X's and Joe's. If you haven't caught X's and Joe's yet on the Back Home Network, you know, Bob Moats, Mike Weemuth do an awesome job of breaking down college basketball normally, but we're going to do a football specific show. And one of the things we're going to talk about is, what do you do when you've already had all of this immediate success? This is not how things normally go. Normally there's a gradual building process to get to where Indiana got to last year. I mean, Miami's a great example of a program that's been slowly building. They've changed coaches a couple of times. They've had to scaffold themselves up from the Al Golden era. They didn't make the playoff. Indiana did. Indiana came out of nowhere on that. SMU is kind of in a similar boat on the Indiana side. And so how do you manage that? And do you realize that football, whether it's the NFL or whether it's college, if you have immediate success, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean that you're going to continue that success. I think from what the staff did in the offseason, from what the athletic department did in terms of financial support for football, they did as well as they could have possibly done, not just in retaining their best players, but in going out and getting key newcomers and doing so with a pocketbook that was certainly open in a way that it had never been before. That doesn't guarantee anything, but all you can get at this point is a hope that you can keep the trajectory going at a high level. And I think that's something IU fans are going to have to get their heads wrapped around. And Jeremy Gray, we heard him talk about this on Noon Edition last week on WFIU. I was on that show with him. And he's like, you know, just the financial delta between Ohio State and Michigan up here, and really kind of Penn State's in that same category, and everybody else. I mean, Oregon's kind of in between. And then you've got the Wisconsins, the Iowas, the Michigan States. That's the echelon Indiana wants to be in. And, you know, you can, with that and with the 12-team playoff, you can go win a national title if you can get into the playoff.
Right.
You don't have to be the top two teams in the conference anymore. That's where Indiana's got to figure out a way to sustain, bring in the type of talent that allows them to compete at that level. That's one of the things I'm most fascinated about this year is, does what it looks like it's great on paper correspond to what's actually going to be great on the field in a way like it did last year, when we probably felt like we were overshooting our win totals and we actually undershot them.
Right. Well, I think the same thing this year is, you know, making the college football playoff. Take a moment. That actually happened. That really did. You know, I do think it kind of reset some expectations. I think it definitely raised the floor of the program. But for me, I don't think it changed the ceiling. What I mean by that is I think you can have a really good season this year, not make the college football playoff, probably maybe not even be in serious contention for the college football playoff, and still have a really good season. And I do think that paradigm also, like, you can't just now suddenly say, okay, now we're perennially supposed to be in the college football playoff, and if we don't make it, that's a disappointment. It's like, no, that's not the way it works either. If you win 8-9 games and you're not in that discussion, that's still a really good season off of what you did last year, and you're now building that base where you can be that level of program that you just talked about, where when you have those spikes, you're now spiking into the 10-11 win range, and you don't have the dips into the 3-4 win range. The 3-4 win range, yeah.
Right. And look, this is where, again, we talk a lot about raising the baseline and thinking about where you're at. Bill Connolly does a great job of this with S&P Plus and looking at historical data, where it's like, where were you generally in offense, defense, and special teams in a given year? But then how does that carry over from year to year? Right. And what picture does that paint of how your program is doing, what you're doing well? And we saw that even in past eras. Like, you go back and look at the charts from the Kevin Wilson era, and it's like offense starts to shoot up, defense falls into the floor. Right. But then you get that spike in that last year when you bring Tom Allen as defensive coordinator, and it looks confusing, but at the time we can verify, yes, it was confusing in real life as well. And I think what Indiana's looking for, as you mentioned, an 8 or 9 win season is still a top 5 season in the history of IU football, even counting last year as one of those seasons. And I think ultimately what you've got to do as a program, and this is what I believe the brilliance of Curt Cignetti and his staff and the brilliance of that hire, is this is a man who both understands that you have to do that and understands how to do that. And I think this is where it's going to be an interesting test case, because normally where Indiana, I had a question from Griffin Gonzalez for the podcast today, which actually was very much in line with what you said earlier, you asked earlier, which was, can you compare the level of excitement coming into this year and the expectations for this year compared to 2021? You led off with that same thing. Like, that was the last season we were really excited coming into it. But I think it's worth noting that season, Indiana came in 16th in the preseason poll, but their starting quarterback had gone down with either his second or third season-ending injury the previous year. I think it was his second at that point. They'd already lost Kalen DeBoer after the 2019 season. And while Nick Sheridan seemed to do a pretty good job, you also had lost Kane Womack. Like, there was a lot of change that had happened with the staff. You'd lost Ballou and Ray as the strength and conditioning coaches to Alabama. And to some degree, I think the shock of those changes was delayed by COVID. And that 2020 season, while it will still be, and it's always going to be remembered as one of the best seasons in IU football history because you only lost one game in the regular season, the lack of preparation from so many of the other teams dropping out and players dropping out due to COVID, it just created such a chaotic sense that you didn't get a real grasp of how good or how bad the infrastructure of the IU program was until that next full season in 21. And you watched it fall apart very quickly. And it probably would have fallen apart even if Michael Penix hadn't gotten injured, hadn't rushed back, and hadn't gotten re-injured so early in that season. The expectation is different now. And a lot of it comes from the fact that Indiana retained almost all of their assistants. The one they didn't retain, Tino Sunseri, was not even a coordinator, he was a quarterback's coach. And they went out and got what appears to be a pretty good replacement who brings different skill sets to the table. But you still got Mike Shanahan at OC. You still got Brian Haynes at DC. You still got the rest of the staff in their roles. And everybody's had a chance to grow some roots and really get their head wrapped around the Indiana project. And keep in mind all the stuff that happened last summer and early fall that led into that magical season. It was all happening on the fly. Like, everybody was still getting used to being in Bloomington for the first time. Now everybody's been here for a year and a half, and that makes a huge difference, with the exception of Chandler Whitmer, obviously. It makes a huge difference in the bedding in process, the comfort level, and the understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and letting that imbue in the roster as a whole. Like, I've been going back and watching the early games last year, and it was still a relatively shaky team really until about halftime of that Maryland game. And it felt like they really hit their stride in that game. They've got the opportunity to not have to take nearly as long on the ramp up this year. And I count coaches just as much as I count players in that, because everybody's familiar with the environment. And I think that is a huge thing that you cannot underrate when it comes to thinking about the expectations for this season as opposed to 2021.
I just want to expand on that a little bit as well. Just, the other thing is too, you can never, you don't take away what happened in 2020, but 2020 was also just a very unique season. So it's hard to disentangle. Did the COVID, did the no fans, did that help? Did it hurt? They still played the games. They still won them. But there was always that question of like, was this just a result of that? That was also a year where, you played a bowl game, you looked a little bit flat. I again was kind of just rethinking of last season, and just this has to be said again. The only two teams that we lost to played in the national championship game. The two games that we lost were both on the road and I'm just going to steal some of my thunder for later on today or later on this podcast. But like the two games we lost were also in horrifically bad weather games. Now, both teams had to play in them, but it's like you're playing in very hostile environments in really horrible weather. And those are the two teams that went to the national championship game. You acquitted yourself very well. And, oh, by the way, that 2020 year, once Penix went down, it was like you're just hanging on to win that Wisconsin game. You knew it was going to be tough in the bowl game. This is a year that, Curtis Rourke basically broke his thumb after the Nebraska game. The team was never quite the same last year, but they still powered through and won a bunch of games. And, oh, by the way, we learned he was actually injured the entire season as well on the ACL. So there's much different parallels. But again, I will just go back to, for a team that's bringing back, bringing a new quarterback in, brings a lot of other players back. This is where nationally it's funny. No one's talking about Indiana. It's like, we only lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame, who were the last two teams standing. Yep. Maybe a little bit of respect would be nice, but that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to dive into, and we should probably go ahead and dive into it. We got to get 12 games in for this. So let's start with week one, Old Dominion, Indiana. Old Dominion is, as Curt Cignetti has noted, a better team on, maybe than what you might think on paper. This is a team that, they were in a good position last year in Columbia playing South Carolina. It's a team that, is certainly going to be a level down from a talent perspective than Indiana. But you go back and look at what they did last year, and at 5-7, they didn't lose very many games by very many points. They were competitive in almost every game they played, except the game that they had at home against Virginia Tech. And it's a tricky game from Indiana's perspective in a couple of levels. Like, as much as we've talked about and hyped the different additions, the reality is you're going to have a guy under center who's never taken an official snap outside of the spring game with anybody else on the roster, except for the slot receiver from Cal that came in, who we don't even know is going to necessarily start. And you've got a program that is coming off of a whole year, a whole off season of hearing about how great they are now. So, there are things that you need to have your antenna up and really your eyes out for in terms of how does this start, because Old Dominion is not likely to come in and lay down. This is a game, and it's a game Indiana needs to win. It's a game Indiana will win, but it's a game Indiana needs to win handily because they are suddenly in a beauty contest nationally about margin of victory, style points, all the things we've never really thought about with IU football, because it's always just been, God, can we get it 6 wins so we can go to a bowl, please? If you harbor ambitions of the college football playoff, you not only have to think about how you're playing and the style points in this type of a game, you also have to think about the fact that you've got a target on the entire program's back right now, because Indiana, for whatever reason, has now been held up as everything wrong with the new era of college football by certain media members and voters because of the schedule changes that they've made to try to adapt to the realities of playing a 9-game conference schedule in the Big Ten. So this is a really tough challenge for Curt Cignetti, because he's got to get his guys to just do the basics well, play together effectively, execute what they've seen, have a high level of of execution, while also going out and saying essentially, well, we got to win this game by a pretty significant margin, because if we don't cover the spread, suddenly it puts us behind the 8 ball all the way up to that Illinois game in terms of how you're viewed nationally.
Now, I was talking to somebody else about these schedules, and they were like, the trouble with being a really good team that Indiana is now in, scheduling these kind of cream puff non-conferences, is you could lose some of them, or you could be in a really tough game, and like that's the negative part. And I do think you're mentioning all those things, which are true. This is also a place where the fan base needs to get. I mean, you and I have been at Memorial Stadium hundreds of games where the first game of the season, 1-3 and out. I'm like, come on, are we doing this again? Like, fans got so fed up, and I'm not saying we're there yet, but it's like the fans are going to take some time to kind of get in this mindset too. And there's a world where we could be playing very well, but you're up 13-3 at halftime, and it's like, Old Dominion starts second half with the ball, they make a good drive, and it's like, what is going?
Right.
Like, I know we're going to win, but what is going on here? So I'm with you. It almost feels like you need to come out and score on 2 of your first 3 drives and probably hold Old Dominion to no more than 3 points. On the flip side, you saw this a little bit last year with the way Cignetti attacked teams, and when he smelled blood, he wasn't really one to like let up. So I do think there's a world where Cignetti knows that, and he's like, I want to just throw a couple of haymakers, put Old Dominion out, and then in the second half we can work on some stuff and not have to show too much of the kitchen sink. So I'm not as concerned, but I'm with you. That first quarter is going to be really interesting. If we go, if we have 2 drives that don't end in any points, that's going to be an interesting spot to be in.
It will be. And look, I mean, some of the rhetoric from Cignetti on this is you want to give your opponent respect, and I think he does a good job of doing that. This is an Old Dominion team that comes in, I think they're 102nd in S&P Plus right now, at least they were as of last week, and they were about 89th in returning productivity, and a team that obviously lost some players along the way in the transfer portal. It's hard to rate I would honestly, in general, rating the teams in the bottom 50 is very difficult in college football, because there's so much movement and so many changes to the rosters. It's hard to say, but I think Indiana wins this comfortably. I'm just saying it could be a little bit like FIU last year, because you've got new pieces, new things you're trying out. It's just going to be one of those things where if Indiana gets off to a slow start, I'm not worried. If they have a slow finish, well, then I'm a little more concerned, but I'm not really anticipating that.
Same. So we're 1-0.
Yeah.
We both have us 1-0.
Yeah. Kennesaw State is significantly worse than Old Dominion. They're coming in, their S&P Plus ranking to start the year is 131st. If you look at their offensive S&P Plus projection, it is literally dead last. So this is, again, it's not a game I'm particularly concerned about. This is a relatively new team to FBS. There's not a huge amount to communicate about them. It's going to be an interesting matchup at the quarterback position, Scott, and that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But in terms of the actual team that Indiana is going to be playing, I'm not really worried about this one. Well, there's not even a whole lot to say about it, other than obviously Dexter Williams is coming back to campus and is going to be playing for Kennesaw State. That would be an interesting wrinkle.
If you use last year as any indication, once the team kind of got their feet under them, they beat Western Illinois 77-3. And so I think you could see something similar here. And I think this is also where you could see them trying to rack up some style points. I think everything you said before the Old Dominion game is 100% true. It's like we are, for some reason now, we're the bad boys. We're Cobra Kai of college football, and everybody's using us for every argument. And it's going to be fun if we have a tight game, or we only win by 14 or something, don't cover the spread, and everyone's going to be like, oh man, look at Indiana playing a soft schedule. It's like, would you please look at Ole Miss? Or like, I'm sure there'll be some SEC school doing this.
State, look at Penn State's schedule. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, please reference someone else. That'll be awesome to deal with. But I also believe that Cignetti understands all of these things as well. I think he has definitely shown that he understands the media, likes twerking the media, and knows what the media wants and what they're going to talk.
Did you say twerking?
Yeah, like giving him a twerk, like a little, I
think you mean twerking, like the media.
Twerking
is something else entirely.
It's all right. Yes, no, needling the meat. I'll go to my Needling the media. Yes, he's not doing a Miley
I
Cyrus.
cannot wait for the comments on YouTube after this one. That's great. Yeah.
Look,
Anyway,
I think he understands that. So I think one of these three games, if not two of the three, I could see us laying the wood to somebody. And this is more of a Crimson Cash talk. I would bet beating the spread on all three of these games. I think we're going to cover the spread on all three.
Yeah, Indiana State, there's not a lot to say. And that's a game you just expect Indiana to just pack it in and they'll take care of business. They'll get a lot of depth pieces out there. They'll keep it relatively vanilla, but they can overpower Indiana State physically. So, 3-0 for both of us.
Right.
And so then we get into the meat of the schedule. And right away, Scott, it's amazing we don't have a ton of late September really important games in Bloomington. They're normally like right at the start of the season, like we're playing Ohio State, in August 30th, or they're in mid-October.
Right.
So this is a really unique game, but what is likely to be at least a top 20 matchup, maybe a top 15 matchup, probably two undefeated teams.
Something to say about Illinois real quick. Just I forget who the writer was. I just read an article in The Athletic just about college football, and the writer was like, the more I've looked at Illinois, I'm kind of wondering maybe they're not going to be as good and they might be a little overranked. It's like, great. Do you mind now re-ranking them, please?
Right.
And it's funny because I'm reading a little more of those refrains. You're like, man, the more I look at Illinois, I'm not sure. And it's like, okay, but if they win, they're just going to stay 12th. Nobody ever re-ranks. It's just it's frustrating the way college football works that way. But anyway,
no, it's a fascinating matchup because everybody looked at Illinois beating South Carolina by 4 points in the bowl game at the end of the year and said, wow, this team won 10 games. Wow, they've got Luke Altmaier back. Wow, they've got all these guys returning. They're going to be great. They're going to be this year's Indiana. So we've got this year's Indiana against last year's Indiana, even though they're not actually this year's Indiana because they won 10 games last year.
Right.
As our buddy Stefan Kreisnick has pointed out many times, you have to have won 3 games or fewer last year and then win a bunch of games this year to
they
qualify.
Were in a BCS Bowl 15 years ago.
Yeah, it does not. I think it was closer to 20 years ago, but it doesn't.
When was our last one? Yeah,
that's a fair point. But no, the thing about Illinois that I find fascinating, they do have a lot of production back, and you do, I think, get some benefit of the doubt. But what's fascinating is you go and look at the power rankings, S&P Plus, and I think PFF and a couple of others, and Illinois is pretty consistently not in the top 15. I think they're 19th in S&P. Indiana's 23rd. And if you go back and look at their actual results last year, which is something that I've noticed as I've gotten progressively more into college football, commentary, what I've noticed is a lot of the journalists don't seem to actually look at the results. They just look at the vibes.
Right.
They would get along great with Tom Allen, clearly. But if you look at Illinois last year and what they did, they needed basically a last 5-minute drive to come back and beat Kansas at home. They needed a last-minute drive to beat Nebraska, who was great until they played Indiana, and then they sucked, if you'll recall that chronology. They lost by 14 at Penn State. They barely beat the worst Purdue team of our lifetimes at home. 50 to 49. They had to win that game overtime.
Yeah.
They did beat Michigan, and I give them credit for that, although Michigan was in the death throes of not knowing what to do with their quarterback at that point. They lose by 8 at home to Minnesota, and then they only beat Rutgers on the road by 7. They only beat Northwestern on the road by 10, and then, of course, they won the game against South Carolina in the bowl game. So I think Illinois is going to be good. I think they'll win 8 or 9 games this year, but I think it's a mistake, and maybe I'll eat my words, in late September on this, but I think it's a mistake by the national media to look at Illinois and then look at Indiana and what they've got coming back and say, yeah, Illinois is better. Like, Illinois may prove to be better, but I don't know what you're using as justification in the off season to put that forward, other than, oh, we like Brett Bielema, which that's not a good rationale as far as I'm concerned.
No, and I to go off of this, looking at last year's schedule, after that game at Oregon, fine, you lose at Oregon, you're 6-2. And if you're Illinois, you look at your schedule, it's like, all right, we have Minnesota at home, we have Michigan State at home, we're at Rutgers, not a tough road environment, and then we're at Northwestern, which is not a road environment. And then they come out and lay a dud and lose at Minnesota at home. It's like they were 6-2, looking at, we could be 10-2. Like, we could throw ourselves into the competition of maybe getting in the playoff, like maybe not, like, and when they had a moment and they had the pressure, they laid a dud, similar to like Indiana had that moment a couple times in the year against Nebraska. They had it against Michigan. They closed it out. And so I'm using the same thing here. I love that this game is in Bloomington. I love that we're having 3 straight home games leading into this fourth game. I think the atmosphere is going to be electric. Like you and I have mentioned a couple different times, probably the two highest ranked teams ever to play at Memorial Stadium at the same time. I'm so fired up for this game. I hope Illinois does their part. It would be so Illinois of them to lose to Duke and just screw it all up and not be in a good spot.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think we win, and I don't think we'll ever have another game like Nebraska where we just blow someone's doors off that we're not expecting. Maybe we will, but I could see this like somewhere in between Nebraska and Maryland, where it's maybe not that much of a doors being blown off, but it's not as close to the Maryland. Like, it's somewhere in that range where we might be up by 14 or 17 at some point, and it gets a little bit closer at the end, but never feels that close. I feel very comfortable with a win here.
Look, I think it'll be a tight game for a little while, but I just think Indiana's going to have enough quality that they're going to be able to distance themselves past Illinois in this one. I think it's got so many positive potential items going for IU, because I hope Illinois comes in undefeated. I hope it's a big game. I hope it's a national TV game, either at night or at noon. It's probably going to be night. That would be my guess. And I have no insight in.
Is that what you want? Like an 8 o'clock?
I would love a 7:30 kick. I think that would be an amazing atmosphere in late September in Bloomington. Give me a break. So that would be my hope, but we'll see what happens. And either way, I'm so pumped for that game and that environment. And I think Indiana is going to be pumped and ready for it as well. Then you got to go right from there to a house of horrors historically for Indiana. You got to travel to Iowa. And, Scott, I've listened to a ton of podcasts. I've read a bunch of material about college football this year. I have no idea what to actually make of the Iowa Hawkeyes. They're always good, and that's the thing about Kirk Ferentz. After years of getting criticized, he made the change at offensive coordinator. He brings Tim Lester in, fires his son. They did get better on offense last year. They're always, it seems like, always good on defense. It seems like they're always good on special teams. I just don't know what to make of them this year, because they're roughly in the same area as Indiana in terms of their S&P Plus preseason rating. They're 28th, but again, it's way skewed, where they're 68th in offense. They're 10th in defense. They're 12th in special teams. You would expect them to be good in both of those phases. They bring in a transfer quarterback from FCS, which you can win with. But this is one of those games where on paper, I think a lot of people are saying Indiana can win that game. I think there's been some underrating of Iowa from people, but I also think maybe there's some overrating going on of Iowa because they're Iowa in scare quotes. I don't have a great real vibe on this game, other than I know that Kinnick is a very difficult place for anybody to play and win, Indiana included. And going back to that 21 season, having had the whole season derailed in the first quarter of the game that you played at Kinnick, it does kind of give you pause just seeing that game right after such a big game as they have against Illinois.
Yeah, like I still remember that game in 21 where it's like I wanted to leave before the wave. So can we just get to the wave? Are we down 28-0? But this could also be an Iowa team that could theoretically be 2-2. I mean, they play at Iowa State and then they play at Rutgers. They could lose that Rutgers game. Maybe not. It could be 3-1. They could lose that Rutgers game, and then after that, they're at Wisconsin. They play Penn State, still with a home and home with Oregon, and then at USC. I mean, they have a tough schedule. This is where years of Scott would just be like, look, man, I think we have a really good team, but you're not going to win in Kinnick. Like, that's just like Indiana has got to prove they can win a game like that. I will say that we haven't played a true road game in just normal weather conditions. The game at Ohio State, first off, that was a team that also won the national championship. I don't think Iowa is at that level. That's also a game that we held our own for quite some time until we didn't, and the weather was awful.
Right.
I would say the same thing against Notre Dame. That was a team that ended up making the national championship. There was a couple of busted plays, which happened, but outside of, a 99-yard run, we are relatively in that game. It was also freezing cold, and you had an injured quarterback. I just think there's a lot of, not saying, we lost both those games against Ohio State and Notre Dame. I just think those are different scenarios. And there's some extenuating circumstances that may not be at play here. It could just be a normal weather game. You could have an Iowa team that's a little bit reeling, that's nervous about the next 2 games in their schedule. And this is where, as a fan, I'm going to buy in and be like, I think this is also where, again, I'm putting a lot in Cignetti, where it's like, I think Cignetti wants to put this narrative to bed where,
Right.
there's 3 tough road games this year that we all know of: Penn State, Oregon, and Iowa. If we go 0 for 3 in those, the narrative for this team will still kind of be, okay, great, go do something. Like, do something against a good team on the road.
Right.
And I'm not saying you have to win at Penn State or Oregon, but this is one where if you've moved up, if you've leveled up, this is a boss that you can beat that isn't the big boss at the end of the game. And I think Cignetti knows all those things too. I think with Mendoza, with what we're bringing back, I think we're going to be good. I think we're going to win this game.
So I'll say this. I talked about this on the big red carpet with Rhett Lewis, which you all need to check out. The new episode just dropped. That show is live. If you love IU football, you're going to love that show. So go listen to that show. But it's interesting because a lot of it is mentality, I think, and a lot of it is you as you said, you've got to get your players in a position where they believe. It's routine. It's like we do what we need to do in there, we're going to win. It can be very loud in those circumstances, and that clearly created problems in the Ohio State game, where Mike Kadick has talked about it, where it's like you just couldn't hear. Right. And if you listen to Rhett Lewis on Big Red Carpet, he talks about when they played at Oregon, when they beat Oregon in that 2004 season, they couldn't hear anything. And you've got to learn how to get over that. And Indiana's got to win one of those. We've talked for years about when is Indiana going to win the big road game.
Right.
But it's interesting because as much as Kinnick's been hard for IU to win at, if you take the last 7 years and you look at who's won at Kinnick, it's not an exclusive list. Iowa State's done it twice. Minnesota's done it. Michigan's done it. Nebraska's done it. Purdue's done it. Penn State's done it. Wisconsin's done it. And Northwestern's done it. And these were not all ranked teams that did it. So it's really about execution. And I think for Indiana, it's like, can your defense be in the same ballpark as Iowa? But can your offense execute against Iowa's defense effectively? That's going to be the big question mark. This is the game I'm wavering on the most, Scott. I'm ultimately going to say, yes, Indiana's going to get it done in this game. They have to, in my opinion, if they're going to elevate their season above what would be a really, really good season into one where they're actually in playoff contention. And I feel like Cignetti is going to have them ready for it in a way that, and again, like you said, it's not the big boss. It's not like they're going into the big house or into, Columbus or even Penn State, although we'll talk about that one in a little bit. So I'm with you there.
Okay.
They get the bye, and then they've got the game at Oregon. And this is another one where, again, I think Indiana, I think Rhett Lewis brought this up on the pod. They're the last Big Ten team, to win at Oregon. And Now, granted, that's kind of obviously Oregon's only been in the conference for 1 year. So you got to kind of throw that out a little bit.
And it's also you having to give props to Jerry DiNardo.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll force myself to do it, if I have to. But this is a tough place for anybody to go in and win. And you go back and look, they lost at home against Washington in 2022. They don't have a whole lot of other losses, in Eugene. This is a really, really good program. It's a program that's going to have to do a lot of reloading, but it's not a program that's used to losing at home. And it's going to be a program that, just talent-wise, I would have loved to have seen how Indiana would have matched up against them last year. There's a lot of question marks with Oregon this year, new quarterback, new offensive line, but they've always got great athletes and great skill position players. They recruit at such a high level. Dan Lanning's a really excellent coach. It's going to be real hard for Indiana to go in and win. A lot of people think Indiana's going to win this game in Indiana circles. I can't quite get there. I've got this as Indiana's first loss of the year. I'll be out there. I know you'll be out there, but I feel like, they've got a great shot at winning, but I got to give the benefit of the doubt to Oregon at Oregon if I'm going to give Indiana the same benefit of the doubt at home against Illinois.
That's really fair. I think, when you saw Oregon and Ohio State play last year, there's moments where it kind of looks like SEC versus Big Ten basketball. Like, man, these guys are just like a different speed. I mean, Ohio State's got a ton of dudes, but they're a little more big. Like Oregon is just fast and quick, and guys are just all over the place. The thing that's going to be interesting is the game before this, Oregon plays at Penn State. Of course, they have a bye week too. It's not as bad as last year where it seemed like everybody had a bye week before they played us for like 7 straight weeks. I wish we were playing Oregon right after that. Oregon's going to have some time to come back across the country. It is going to be fascinating. Oregon will be in an interesting mindset because they will either be on top of the world where they beat Penn State and they will be a top 5 team and looking at, they will have gotten through the toughest part of their schedule up, the Indiana at home. And then it's pretty smooth sailing, so to speak. Or if they lose at Penn State, it's like they come back, they're really licking their wounds, and it's like a loss to Indiana at home is kind of knocking them out of any contention of getting back in the national championship conversation. All of that said, I think we can compete, but I will say I'm not sure any of that really matters because I just think that we'll talk about this a little differently in Penn State, but I think the athletic quickness, you just have years and years of recruiting at a different level for different type of athletes. That's going to be really hard for any team at Indiana's level to compete with. You're going to need a lot of things to go right. And so I cannot get there for an Indiana win. I honestly am kind of nervous about our ability to even stay within the spread in this game. I could see us losing by 14 or 20 in this game.
I think Indiana could go head to head with Oregon on a neutral field. This is not a neutral field.
No, yeah.
But we'll see. I think if Indiana's route to victory in this game, how well can their defense stymie what Oregon wants to do? And that's something that a lot of teams struggle with.
Yeah.
Ohio State didn't even really figure it out last year. And that ended up being as much the offense is matching blow for blow. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how it plays out. I'm looking forward to being at the game. I think it's going to be
we're both 5-1.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next game on Indiana's schedule. They
Spittoon time.
They get Michigan State at home. Michigan State's going to be better this year than they were last year, but Michigan State has a ways to go, I think, to get up to Indiana's level. Their offense was putrid last year. I think they're going to get better play out of Aiden Childs. They have to, if he's going to remain as their starting quarterback. But this is a Michigan State team that, they're going to be licking their wounds. Like Indiana put an absolute walloping on them last year at Spartan Stadium. They've got to be looking at that and saying, we need our revenge. But I also think that's a game, win or lose in that Oregon game, Indiana's going to be primed for. Signetti, as rough as the game started last year, where Indiana falls behind by a couple of scores, it was bloodless in how they went out and just massacred them the rest of the way. They handled them in the trenches. And of course, you've got the added issue of Michigan State might be looking ahead to Michigan the following week because they've got them on their schedule on the 25th. I think Indiana, this is a rivalry that is very much one-sided in Michigan State's favor, but I like Indiana for the very rare occasion here of winning a couple of games in a row in this rivalry and knocking off the Spartans.
I've said this in our last CrimsonCast podcast. I think Michigan State has the hardest Big Ten schedule on record. They are at USC, at Nebraska, home to UCLA, at Indiana, home to Michigan, at Minnesota, home to Penn State, at Iowa, and then Maryland. They could win 1 or 2 games in the Big Ten. I'd be like, I'm not sure if they're bad. They just had a rough schedule. They could very easily be 0-3 in the Big Ten coming into that game, knowing they have to play at Indiana, and then they're going to be going back home to play Michigan. They could be in the situation that Indiana has been in before, where you just lose track of the rope and you're just free falling. And so I think you're catching them at a pretty interesting time. I also think, just from a program standpoint, I think we're at or ahead where they are. They're still in a longer rebuild process. They have a younger quarterback. They have some time to go. I think Indiana wins that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be real tough for them, like you said, and I'll be fascinated to see what they do because I think Jonathan Smith's a good coach. I think Aiden Childs is a good quarterback. I don't think people realized how empty the cupboard was there
Yeah.
when he took over. And so I think if they played that game at Spartan State, we thought that was going to be a tough game last year. It ended up not being a tough game. I think it'll be a less tough game this year. Anyway, the following week, Indiana gets to host UCLA. And that was the game that announced Indiana to the national audience last year out in the Rose Bowl. Of course, Tino Sunseri, now the offensive coordinator over there, they were able to reload a little bit. UCLA still kind of behind the 8 ball from an NIL perspective compared to Indiana and other schools. I don't know what to expect out of UCLA this year. If you look at them from an S&P Plus perspective, they come in at 51st. By comparison's sake, Michigan State is 64th. So S&P Plus is expecting them to be a bit better. And I actually think if you go back and look at what UCLA did last year, I mean, if they can fix their offense, it's not a complete disaster. They somehow managed to rally to 5-7 last year. They came close to beating USC at home. They beat Iowa, down the stretch. So they showed some grit, but they really had to do it defensively. I would like Indiana in this game anyway, but Indiana's offensive efficiency and how much they thrashed them last year, 42-13, I think that carries over this year as well.
So you'll remember this, but for younger listeners, there was a great basketball player named Michael Jordan. Go reference the Last Dance.
Thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah. But Jordan, for a while, like during the 92 finals, just went at Clyde Drexler because some people said Drexler was as good as Jordan. It's like Drexler didn't say it. Drexler was just happened to be playing basketball. Jordan took that and went at him. I've heard this story a couple of times. It does feel like Cignetti is kind of focused in on Deshaun Foster as one of these guys who, Cignetti felt like it took him forever to get his chance as a head coach. And then he had to go to Eli. Yeah. He had to start at the bottom and work his way up. And I do know that Cignetti looks at guys who just kind of get handed Power 4 jobs with no real experience with a little bit of disdain. I think in the time that we have Cignetti as our head coach, as long as Foster is the head coach at UCLA, I don't think we're losing to UCLA. Sure. I think this is a Jordan, Clyde Drexler situation. I think he is going to take out all of his anger and all of the years where he felt like he was slighted on Deshaun Foster. So if we're playing UCLA, I think we're going to win, and you can clip this and save it for next year.
That's a fascinating read on everything, Scott. I don't disagree. So we'll see how all that rolls. Let's go ahead and dive in then to the back end of the schedule as Indiana takes a road trip the following week to Maryland. And it's fascinating how the destinies of these two programs have kind of diverged from.
Yeah.
I remember us
a couple of years ago, we're like, can't we just be Maryland? Like, right. Man, they're passing us up.
We were lamenting how they had they had solidified themselves. They'd been to more bowls recently. They'd beaten Indiana. And then I really feel like in the middle of that game last year that Indiana hosted Maryland, it was like the fulcrum just swung so far the other direction. And Maryland is just in this weird spot right now where they had been going along pretty nicely. They were 8-5 in 2023, and then they go 4-8 last year. And you look at what they've got talent-wise, and they are not rated particularly highly. I've seen some people rate them as like the third worst team in the Big Ten. Obviously, Purdue and Northwestern are kind of down in that lower range, but Maryland's 70th in S&P Plus coming into this year. They don't have a ton of production coming back, and that's a game, again, Indiana needs to win. They've won at Maryland before, but it's one of those games when you're looking at the schedule, they can't afford to let down. They've got to be amped for that game. Every road game is difficult, but I would expect this game to kind of go like the Michigan State game did last year, where maybe there's some initial fight from Maryland because their season is on the precipice, and then Indiana comes out and really takes care of business as you go through the rest of that game. It could be very ugly for Maryland this year all the way around. I think Indiana adds to that misery.
I mean, outside of their win at USC, which was a 1-point win, which was a win, USC at home, Maryland finished the last 8 games 1-7. I mean, they free-falled out, and you could say it kind of started at that game against Indiana because Indiana kind of knocked them out, and then they were never the same. I agree with you. I think this is where, at this point, I think we have us both 7-1. And so Indiana is now back in the conversation for college football playoff. Indiana is firmly there for a Big Ten title game appearance. I think that, we saw, again, all we have is to go off of what we've seen with Cignetti. When those moments were there, when we had to beat Michigan to kind of keep the train running, and like, this is a big moment, we took care of business. When you're at Michigan State last year, you go down 14-0, I think, or 10-0, and then you just come storming back. Cignetti has shown that in these moments, his team is ready, and they're not going to overlook a game like this. And even if, I wouldn't say overlook, but even if they have a slow start or they're down by multiple scores, they can quickly rally and change things up. So I think this is also a win, and that puts us at what, 8, and we're each 8-1.
Yeah, 8-1 going into Penn State.
Okay.
Penn State, in many people's eyes, perhaps the best team in college football coming into the year. But as you'll hear from people, it's a bit of a caveat, because there's not really a perfect team in college football this year.
Right.
There's, everybody's got questions. Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State, Clemson, Texas, Georgia, they've all got questions. This is one where, Indiana's never won at Penn State. They've knocked on the door a couple of times, including, oddly, down the stretch of the 2023 season when they only lost that game by 9. It was a very odd game, and that was a very good Penn State team. That was a 13th ranked team that year. I think, much as I talked about with Oregon, and maybe even more so, because I think that there are more certainties with Penn State's roster than there are with Oregon's roster this year, coming into the year. I do feel like you got to give Penn State the benefit of the doubt at home. It's almost certainly going to be a night game. It's almost certainly going to be a key game for Penn State, because they're also not just going to be in the playoff picture, likely at that point, but in the Big Ten championship picture. And it's a game that they really can't afford to lose. I mean, you look at Penn State's schedule, their non-conference schedule is arguably worse than Indiana's: Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. But they got to play Oregon at home. They got to play at Iowa. They got to play at Ohio State, and they got to play Indiana at home. And then they got Nebraska at home down the stretch. It's a tough stretch of games. Like, Penn State, if they make it undefeated through all of that, will absolutely deserve to be in consideration for the number 1 overall seed. I don't know that they're going to make it undefeated. I wouldn't be shocked if they lost at Iowa and at Ohio State. It's just, a lot of it's going to depend on how much of last year carries over. And it's a tough team to kind of figure from that perspective, because you look at last year, they should have lost at Minnesota, and they pulled that one out. And then you can say, well, they won 2 games in the playoff. They made it to the semifinal. But then you look and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. They got to host SMU, and then they got to host Boise State. And yes, they played very well against Notre Dame. I don't want to take that away from them, but again, it's like, I just don't know how good they actually are in the big scheme of things at that level. All that said, I would still pick them in this game versus Indiana. I think this is the hardest game that Indiana's got on their schedule. There's also no shame in losing at Penn State, but you got to learn the lesson from last year. You can't get blown out. You got to keep it close. And I think Indiana's perfectly capable of winning this game. I just would feel intellectually dishonest if I didn't give the nod to Penn State in this one.
I agreed. Agree with all of that. Here's what I'll say is, I also think Penn State they might lose, their game against Oregon and the game against Ohio State. They could have 2 losses, at which point they're kind of out of the picture of contention. If that happens, if they lose at Iowa and Ohio State and they lose to Oregon, we come in higher ranked than them into this game. And maybe some of the sheen is off this game, where it's not a night game and, oh my God, a whiteout. Penn State also needs to show that they can beat top 10 teams both on the road and at home. Here's what I'm going to say, Galen, is Happy Valley, we haven't won there, but it also hasn't been like an insane house of horrors. We've been closer than we should be at times, in a way that I don't feel like we are against Oregon and that kind of speed. We know how to play teams like this. We beat a team like Michigan last year, albeit probably not as good as this team, but has had kind of the historical recruiting. And, Illinois went in and won at Ohio State a couple of years ago. And you look, here's the way I'm going to flip it. If Indiana is really a top 10 team this year, top 10 teams go into Penn State and win. And that's what they do. Michigan has won there. Ohio State has won there. I'm I'm going to just take the handbrakes off. It's also like I kind of want to just try something a little bit different because I think everyone's picking 10-2. That's how I'm going to talk myself into saying Indiana wins this game.
That's fair. I think you're right that top 15 teams do go into Happy Valley and win, but it's generally when Penn State isn't also themselves like a top 5 team. And I think they probably legitimately are this year.
But if they lose to Oregon and Ohio State, they're not. And there's a world where they could be like, man, we've lost the narrative of the season. Like we're not that they could if they have 2 losses, that's a game where it's like we're probably out of Big Ten title and college football playoff contention.
I mean, I can't disagree with you on any of that. I just a lot of like the teams generally that have beaten good Penn State teams or great Penn State teams in Happy Valley win the physical battle in the trenches. And I just don't think Indiana is quite at that level yet physically. Yeah. So that's going to be the big question mark. We'll see what happens with it. I hope you're right. But I really do. But we'll see it. We'll see what happens. All right. Last 2 games. Indiana gets Wisconsin at home. And you mentioned that you thought Maryland might have the toughest schedule in the Big Ten of anybody.
Yeah.
Or Michigan State, sorry. Wisconsin's got an arguably worse schedule overall at Alabama, at
Alabama
Michigan,
one's tough. That's
at Oregon, at Indiana, at Minnesota, and their home games in the conference are Maryland, Iowa, Washington, and Illinois. Outside of Maryland, not exactly a walk in the park.
You think Wisconsin's calling up Alabama's AD and being like, hey, can we just run a story about IU's schedule again and then back out of ours right now? Like, can we just back out of it and see if we can blame Indiana somehow?
Like the Chappelle script where he knocks the water pitcher over and leaves the room. Totally. I think they'd love to do that. No, it's funny because like we were looking at Luke Fickell's contract and he's not getting fired. Like it would cost so much money, like $35 million or something, plus the cost of the new replacement to bring in a different coach. So he's there. I think this is going to be another rough year for Wisconsin because I think they've got to reestablish a different identity because the identity they tried to establish just didn't work. And, they lost their last 5 games last year. They were close in some of those. If you remember, they almost knocked off Oregon at home. And I'll say if this game was in Camp Randall, I'd be a lot more concerned. But I think at this time of year, with Wisconsin probably having lost 6 or 7 games by that point, I really think Indiana is going to be in pretty good shape to win this one. They won against a better Wisconsin team a couple of years ago. That was the last win that Tom Allen picked up. So those are the things to keep in mind, I think, with this. But again, this is where Indiana got really lucky, all told, with injuries and attrition last year. And will they be just as lucky this year? That's going to be an operative question for these last 3 games in terms of what's their health look like, who's playing what positions, how much depth do you have remaining, especially on a defense where there's not that much depth in the back 6. So I'm going to be curious to see how that all works out.
Yeah, it's funny you're saying about the health, but I was thinking about that. Like a couple of years ago, we did when was the last time Indiana had just a healthy quarterback all season? And it just doesn't happen. Like every year is like 3 games and 4 games. And but last year, it's like you could almost say we didn't have that because Rourke had a torn ACL and then he broke his thumb right when it felt like, oh my God, we are like hitting next level offense. And then the offense was always kind of sputtering a little bit after that. And he didn't play the Washington game. I mean, so he didn't play the whole season. So we are kind of due for really a quarterback all healthy all year. It hasn't happened in quite some time. Obviously, if I'm saying we're going to win at Penn State, I think Mendoza, we're going to be pretty healthy throughout all of this. I would say this, we already recorded the Jeremy Gray thing, which is coming after this, but one of the things we talk about is kind of the reframing of everybody getting used to Memorial Stadium being 50,000 people strong. In either scenario, you have us 8-2 going into this game. I have us 9-1. We are firmly ranked. We are in the discussion for we're in the top of the Big Ten, depending on how things shake out. Going into this game, we're looking at possibly winning a Big Ten title or being in the title game. We're in the smelling salts of the college football playoff, although ESPN probably won't have us. They have too many SEC teams to put in there.
Of course.
All I'm saying is I do think that we need to start looking at, Memorial Stadium isn't 100,000 people, but it can be a very interesting place to play, and it can definitely buoy the home team. It's probably not going to scare Wisconsin, but it can definitely buoy the home team. And I do think we have to start looking at and thinking of Memorial Stadium differently. and being like, I think we're going to get a boost because we're going to know, we smell it in the water. It's like, this is the last time we get to see this team, and we're not going to let them lose at home when they have so much riding on it. And so I think that's a real thing here, that I think just like it's tough for Indiana to go into Oregon and Penn State and win, I think it's really tough for any team to come into Memorial Stadium now in November and win a game like that if we're riding high. So, yeah, we're going to win that game.
Final one, Black Friday at Ross-Ade Stadium, Indiana taking on Purdue. Purdue's got like 50 new players on their roster. Yeah. It's impossible to tell how they're going to do. Barry Odom is their head coach. He did lead a comeback in a relatively short order at UNLV. Much like you said with Deshaun Foster, I think Cignetti knows, like, how do you keep the fans happy? To go back to our X's and Joe's friends, how do you keep building the chip stack? Keep beating Purdue handily.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to beat them 66-7 again. But
I was going to go out and say right now, I bet the over on this game. We're going to beat the spread on this game.
Yeah. So I think Purdue could be better, although their quarterback situation looks pretty iffy right now. And I have no idea what to make of the rest of their roster. And they've got a tough schedule. I mean, you look at their schedule, like maybe they can beat Northwestern, maybe they can beat Rutgers. There's not a lot of other easy wins, even in the non-conference, for this team. So we'll see what happens. But I think that I hate to take the bucket game for granted, but I feel like at least for one more year until we find out what Purdue is, I think you can feel pretty safe about saying Indiana's going to win this game.
I mean, is Hoosier the Bison going to go bang the drum, or is he going to ride the train? Like, what's going to happen? This is fun. We got Mascot stuff. Like, even we can go at it. Like, we have some Mascot stuff we can get going on.
That is tremendous.
So I end the season at 11-1. I think that firmly puts us in a Big Ten title game. Yep. And I'm living a fever dream once again. You have us at 10-2, and as we've mentioned a couple times, that could easily put you in the Big Ten title game as well. You look at other teams, like no one is probably going clean. 2 losses could easily get you in there.
Absolutely. And that if you look at the actual schedules, I think when Matt Blaska and I were going through and looking through this on Football Weather, which you should go check out as well, another new show on the Back Home Network where we look at college football more broadly, I think we had like a 6 or 7 way tie for either first or second, with everybody having 2 losses. And the way it goes through, like it's a real possibility. And I don't know what that would mean. I mean, I did not go through and try to figure out what all the permutations would have been in terms of like who loses what. But I think 10-2, you're still both alive for the Big Ten championship game, and you're alive for the college football playoff. And you think about it, it's like, if Illinois only loses 2 games all year, but one of them is to Indiana, and you go in and you beat Iowa and they win 8 games or 9 games this year, that's 2 items that you didn't have on your resume last year. And as long as you've lost respectably at the games at Oregon and Penn State, which I have, or in your case, you don't even lose one of those games, you just got to take care of business everywhere else. It's really hard to do. It's funny. I've been trying to prep myself for the season by not just watching games, but listening to our post-game shows, like the next day shows, just to kind of get back into the rhythm of things. And I'm listening to the one after the Michigan game. It's a fascinating listen. I recommend you do that at some point.
Okay.
But it's interesting. At that point, it was like, okay, it's real hard to go 10-0. Look at all the teams that even this week didn't go 10-0. If Indiana's 10-0 this year, they've made it through a tremendous number of hurdles. And I don't think I look around the college football landscape. I think it's very likely that nobody goes through with less than 1 loss. That you might even have a situation where everybody's got 2 losses. So I think that's the thing. Indiana's got to play as well as possible. They got to keep pace with whatever the leading pack is. And I think if they can do that, and especially if they can get to like late October, like if they can go into that Penn State game, they've only got 1 loss. They're probably a top 10 team nationally at that point. And at that point, all bets are off in a good way for Indiana. So,
well, and I'm trying to have fun and really do something a little bit different, just be more optimistic with 11-1. I do think, honestly, you're probably the most realistic.
Stick to your guns. It's fine. I like this. Okay.
Yeah, but 10-2. But I mean, what's going to be fun is even 10-2 like that. That's a great season. You've won a game at Iowa. I'm just kind of looking forward to if in my scenario comes true, you're 11-1. You beat Oregon State, but it's like I look forward to ESPN being like, well, but Ole Miss is 9-3, and Indiana's non-conference wasn't that good. Ole Miss started the season ranked higher, so let's go ahead and slot them above.
We'll come back to this. We have more of this to talk about. But Scott, another great preview pod. Enjoyed it so much with you. We're not done. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. You're going to hear from Jeremy Gray, Senior Associate Athletic Director, about all the things to expect for the Old Dominion game and the rest of the season in Memorial Stadium. So stick around on the other side of this break. You'll hear that. And Scott, as always, great to talk with you about IU football again, my friend.
Attention, Hoosier Nation. CrimsonCast has brought back the Bison, is now looking to take over Broadway. That's right, Galen and Scott are taking the podcast live at the historic Buzzkirk Chumley Theater on Thursday, September 5th. Doors creak open at 6:30, showtime is 7. And because we know you only come for the legends, IU great Mitchell Page will be one of our special guests. Expect fun takes, IU nostalgia, at least one joke that isn't going to land, and maybe even Galen breaking out his guitar for an acoustic version of the IU fight song. Tickets are on sale now. Go to buzzkirkchumley.org/events and grab yours before they realize nobody should have given us a stage live. September 5th, Buzzkirk Chumley, CrimsonCast Live. We'll see you there.
All right, as promised, joining us once again on CrimsonCast, it's everybody's favorite social media actor from this past summer, Jeremy Gray, Indiana Senior Associate Athletic Director, and the man who
the director, also director. Are you winning an award? Is the Big Ten giving out Emmys or Oscars for you?
You know, I think we ought to create a new award structure in the Big Ten Conference. You know, take that, USC Film School.
We're going to call them the Bisons, right?
That's right. Yes.
The Bisons.
Like the Dundies. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
But no, Jeremy, we've had so many requests from folks who want to know what the Memorial Stadium experience is going to be on game day, what to expect, throughout the course of the season. I know there's a ton of things planned, and we obviously love having you on for a variety of things, but we wanted to just kind of dive in and talk about it. So much excitement building around this football season this year. Already one game sold out against Illinois. So let's maybe just start with some changes to the stadium experience and other items that you'd like to highlight coming into this upcoming year.
Well, some of these things seem basic and not all that sexy or important, but I do think they ultimately really, really matter. Obviously, it matters as a playing surface for the team itself. Kurt Signetti said it's the best field that he's ever been able to coach on. But we've got new field turf, and it does make the place look considerably younger. I think it's a better look overall, and that's, notwithstanding the fading over time due to sunlight and usage that it had over the previous 10 years. So it actually has a new playing surface. I think it looks really, really nice. I think it's going to play really, really well, which is obviously relevant for a team that is trying to protect a perfect home record from a season ago. Some other things that have changed. There's an East Side Club, which is a premium area where, let's just say, the food and the cocktails are a little different than other parts of the stadium. That's going to be down in the south or the northeast corner of the stadium. So it's the club. And then we actually have our loge boxes, which are nice new kind of suite areas that have taken the place of the old flower beds, or actually the dirty tarps from the previous coaching area. I put in the fake grass last year, but this year they got the loge boxes there. I think that's a nice new addition to the stadium. There's more suite type things that we've got on the south end at the top of the rock, and then on the south end zone as well. So not only revenue drivers, but something that I think makes the stadium look better aesthetically. One thing that I'm exceptionally excited for and proud of, and I'm sure I'm going to get, my own informal Twitter poll from people who follow me on Twitter on how well it's executed. But the Cream and Crimson Studios that Galen's actually a figure in, I think is going to be a game changer as well. Radio TV Services did a really nice job for us for literally decades doing video board shows. But they got stretched too thin from other obligations on campus, freelance opportunities, working for the public television station, all sorts of other things. Now we actually have that, largely speaking, in-house in partnership with the media school. And we have staff that's dedicated full-time to doing production elements for our video board shows. And I think I'm a firm believer, and it's frankly why I got marketing this time last year under my purview. I firmly believe that video board shows are the most essential element to the in-game experience for fans. And, we went to Auburn about a year and a half ago. They're the gold standard of this. And we basically took all of the ideas, other than using Charles Barkley in our intro video, from War Eagle Productions. And we've taken a lot of ideas, and I think they're going to be able to work. They're able to rehearse. We're able to have multiple planning meetings. They're able to give their own creative input rather than taking the ads that we give them, stitch together a script 3 days before. I think it's just going to work out better. I think people are going to really like our intro video this year. Last year's did win an Emmy. We beat the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Detroit Lions ass for an Emmy last year, but I think this year's is actually a lot better. I think we've ironed out some of the kinks that were with the run out. I thought last year's run out was the best one we've ever had, but I think there are ways to make it better from a timing standpoint. And we actually have the technology to do it, and actually the people here to rehearse how to do it. We're making improvements to the walk. We got caught up in some construction delays and some bureaucracy that might make it not perfect for the first one, but it should be ready for the second one. We're actually building a structure along the path that people will walk down to make it even more visually appealing than it was a year ago. And then we've got a furry creature that's going to be in the house. So we've got a mascot, and I think that's going to change the game. And then, of course, the towels are back. And I think we've got a good way of passing those out now. And we're going to be doing it for every game, for every seat in the house. So no more 1985 fighting over Cabbage Patch Kids in the mall type situation as young drunk college student takes towel away from father of four. we have a scrimmage in the aisleway. Everybody's going to get a towel.
It did kind of feel like the Warriors there occasionally in the stands. So.
Yeah.
As a fan of the intro video, I'm excited to hear that. Although I love the idea of stealing the Auburn stuff and just like using Charles Barkley and just dubbing over, like, let's go Indiana, just like dubbing over Auburn. But I will say I'm excited to see that, because if people remember a couple of years ago, there was a really great intro video you guys did with it was like cartoon type visions of IU players over IU monuments, like the book, the library and things like that. And like, it was done by a group called Too Tall Animation, which oddly enough, they do some really good Instagram NBA stuff. And like, I went back and saw they did it. So it's gonna be hard to top that, but I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I think the song actually really, really works. That's going to be used for the intro video this year. And the group that we worked with last year to win the Emmy, they're called Rival. They take our creative input. We help out with the editing. They help out with the editing. Basically, it's staging and lighting that's pretty remarkable, and they do for a lot of professional sports franchises. And I think we're now their best college client. So we're really excited to see how this plays on the big board this year.
I know we've had some questions. I don't think I've seen an email on it. When do the lots open for
8 o'clock?
8 a.m. So
Yes.
It's going to be an early and long tailgate as the game starts at 2:30 in the afternoon. So that will be some fascinating vibes. Any other items like in stadium, any new food options or other things on the concourse level worth noting?
I'm not as well versed on this. I should know more about this than I do, and I should have actually asked two people before coming on this podcast so that I could just deliver the goods like the infomercial I'm supposed to be here. I do think that there are going to be more points of sale for things like Buffalo's. Yes, I do think there are new food options. And last year I think Levy made considerable gains in the delivery, point of sale, and quality of our food. But I think they've been able to look at, frankly, some of the limitations of our building. And I think they've been able to contour it in a way that it's going to be better delivered even over last year. So I'm excited to see what Levy does this year.
We had a question on Twitter from Frank in Tipton. He wants to move from section 42 to section 41. So can you pull that up real quick and just see if there's any aisle seats? No, but I'm curious. You did
I'm looking out. Yeah,
we had you guys did a full reseating this year where every season ticket holder, pick their seats, which haven't been done in probably like 5 or 6 years. I'm just curious from your perspective, not that you were doing all of it, but just how did that go? I mean, as a fan, it was a seamless process. We do it every year in basketball. I'm just curious from the university and marketing side, like how did that go from your guys' perspective?
So the technology is really well established at this time. Pac-Ulan does a remarkable job. They have most of the college ticket operations in the country. We made that switch probably 7-8 years ago. I don't know. I'm now the old guy in the department. I don't remember, but it was about 7-8 years ago. We made the switch from Ticketmaster, which really cared more about selling Metallica tickets than they did about college sports tickets. Pac-Ulan really focuses on the college environment, and their technology is great. So I think from that point of view, it was seamless. Anytime you disrupt people's ticket buying habits or where their seats are, some are going to be happy, some are not going to be happy. But we're starting to get into kind of new world problems where we're building our season ticket base and people are making donations and the revenue is starting to flow. And we'll take those types of problems, more than we will the 2022 problems, which are, like anybody got any relatives that they can bring to the game. So,
yeah. Well, even the concession stuff, I don't know that anybody was anticipating at the start of the year that you'd have 3 completely sold out games or 4 completely sold out games as you go to the end of the season. So, I mean, there's logistical things that you'll be able to plan for this year on a number of levels that just weren't necessarily on the radar.
No, and I think this is a very fair critique of the athletic department. Maybe it's both mindset and in actuality. We were built, frankly, to accommodate 35,000 people in the building and not always 53,000 people in the building. Actually, a big example of this was a couple of years ago in women's basketball when they made the charge to the Big Ten championship. Suddenly they went from 2,500 fans to like 10,000 fans in like 2 weeks. And it's like, oh crap, we don't have police handling parking. Like we've got to figure this stuff out. And so there were some staffing, logistical, how to handle getting students all the way up to those seats type problems that we had last year. We're in the 53,000 every game mindset now.
Yeah. Nice. How are ticket sales looking for the Old Dominion game? Here, 4 days out, I think. Do you have are we close to a sellout, or is it going to be?
I'm not going to get in a war with our fans. I don't think that's ever good or productive. And frankly, they can just say be better at your job, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I totally take that as a fair point. I would like a sellout. I mean, just because, frankly, every argument that has ever been made for why it didn't sell out before has been removed. It's 72 degrees. It's a holiday weekend. We won 11 games last year. We went to the college football playoff. You like the coach. You like the players. It's at 2:30. It's not too early for the students. It's not too late for people from Fort Wayne. Like, we are right in that sweet spot. This team deserves your support. I think it's going to be close to a sellout. We're in the mid-40s right now. We tend to get a good walk-up crowd. I think the stadium is going to look amazing, but I would love a sellout for that opener. We got some big things planned for the first game. Not that I'm accepting not having sellouts for other things. I mean, I get the Indiana State thing with the Friday deal and high school football and far away. But this one, I'd love to see a sellout. We're going to need a good walk-up crowd to get it. I do believe we're going to sell out all Big Ten games, so make sure you buy your tickets sooner rather than later. It's not the old days where, you're going to have a friend with an extra one to give you one. People are coming to the games now.
You don't need to tell us what it is, but Galen and I were talking about this. I'm pretty sure with Indiana and Illinois, if they're both 3-0 going into that game, it'll be the 2 highest ranked opponents to, I think, ever play at Memorial Stadium. Are you planning something special for those towels? Like that could be a unique experience. Like, you don't tell us what it is, but are those towels going to be good? We're ready.
I think, Marv Levy said the only must win was World War II, but that's pretty close to it. Like, it's pretty close to it, I think, for both teams.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're a rival. The person who has my job at Illinois will argue with me, but it takes 2 people to care about it that much, I think. But we've never had to plan for Illinois. Like, what are we going to do special for Illinois in the same way we've had to with Purdue or Kentucky for different games? But I do think there is something about this football game that both groups are lathered up, and they want to beat us badly to say that they've arrived, and we don't want to be annoyed by them from now until the end of time. So it's going to be quite a feud in that game. So we're going to be amped up. I think it's going to be a remarkable environment.
I mean, that could be the towel, just not a rival.
Scott, I might bookmark that one. That's pretty good. But then, shit, you got to win the game if you put that on there.
Yeah, you're really.
Run that. All the towels back. We lost. Please turn to the towels.
You got to win the game.
Run that by Sig first. I think
Yeah.
I will say it's interesting on the ticket sales. One of the complaints we've heard, and it's completely out of the athletic department's purview, or really anybody except the Chamber of Commerce, is the hotel costs. It doesn't really apply for Old Dominion because, as you said, it's in the middle of the day. It's like the best possible time I think you could have for an IU football game is 2:30 in the afternoon for all of the people that we.
And you can be at whatever lake you like on Sunday or Monday, man. Like, I mean, there is no argument to not come to this game.
Yeah. But it is interesting, and this goes back to what you mentioned about expecting 53,000. I mean, as many hotels as have been built in Bloomington over, it feels like, the course of the last 15 years, there's a real inventory issue. And even though Indy is a significantly closer drive now with the completion of the interstate, it's still, I think, something I'd love to see some more options for people to come down and stay in Bloomington for football weekends.
I'd agree. And, this has been, and I want to say this out of kindness and appreciation. There have been times where either the campus or the city itself have not been vested in helping Indiana football. I think that script has turned on both scores. There have been times where at orientation, they would make fun of the football program as people were trying to sell tickets. I remember one meeting where they talked about homecoming week with campus communicators, and they included all sorts of things except for the football game and the week's activities. Those days are long over. I think the city has really embraced the team. In a lot of ways, I think they've gotten common sense that, like, hey, this is a huge moneymaker for the town. Hotels remain a challenge. And, they're also a challenge for move-in week, parents' weekend, and both graduation weekends.
It's a challenge in general, and it's kind of what restaurants deal with in a different way in Bloomington, where can you survive off the business from 8 or 9 weekends for the rest of the year if you're not going to have that same level of commerce? And it's a difficult one.
I remember when MCCSC had back to school night the night of the IU Ohio State season opener that was on College Game Day. Yeah, those days are over. That's people are planning around IU football in a good way.
We've made a lot of progress. That's absolutely the case. I guess, final question for me, just in general, the parking situation I know gets ragged on a little bit, but it's a great parking situation when you compare it to what you see at other football schools and campuses. There have been some interesting changes, though, to the parking setup. I think all the lots are pretty much sold out now, if I read my communications correctly. But there are going to be parking garages around campus and in the city, or places where there's going to be opportunities for shuttling in. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I do listen to the fans. I care what fans say. We haven't figured out the third quarter song, and I probably just opened myself up to a follow-up question from Scott. The bird crap on the bleachers obviously is a humiliating thing, and we need to be better about those types of things. Or a closed concession stand on a concourse. I really do listen to the fans. Not that I don't listen to them on this, but this is also part of the mindset that has to change, is that it's hard to park here because we've sold out the football games and people plan on coming to the games. And we have one of the best parking situations in the Big Ten. If you go to a Michigan game, you shuttle in from the mall or you park on the 16th hole of the golf course. Wisconsin's nestled in the middle of the town. There is no place to park. Purdue is really difficult to park. We have a great parking situation, and even garages like the Poplars Garage or down by the Kelly School or at churches across the bypass, it's still not an unreasonable walk. Now, you might not be able to tailgate perfectly, but it's still not an unreasonable walk for people to get to the stadium. So there should be plenty of parking to be able to come and watch.
But to your point, both coming and leaving, people need to account for the fact that you got a lot more people here, and a lot more people staying longer. And when you're trying to exit 50-some thousand people from the stadium area out of Bloomington, which really has a lot of limited points of exit, it's going to take more time.
Yes. And I think that's important too. With 35,000 people, the much noted people leaving at halftime phenomenon, and then of that 35, 10,000 are students that just walked here anyway. It was actually pretty easy to get in and out of the stadium. 53,000 that stay all the way to the gun at the end of the game. It's a different deal.
Yeah.
I'll take traffic problems staying through 4 quarters every day of the week than the old problems that we had.
Absolutely. Scott, anything else from you?
No. I would echo what both of you guys are saying, that, it's a good problem to have, but it is a problem, I think, as the community and fans get used to, the realities of 50,000 a game. It's like things are going to change. But, I think to Galen and I love the Indy 500. It's like they get 300,000 people in there, and people found nooks and crannies to park and walk. And it's like everyone has their place. I just think a lot of people with IU football probably haven't found that yet, because they're so used to, just park and walk up and get it. It's like, that's changed. We're kind of in a weird period where it's like, no, you got to be used to, like people know where to go for Michigan games because they're used to 100,000 people going every single time. So it's probably going to be a bit of an adjustment. But no, I'm excited, and no questions. I'll wait for the first third quarter. I will be there. Old Dominion. I look forward to what the song is, and I'm going to tell everybody as the third quarter is ending, hey, whoa, Jeremy's got something good for us. Jeremy Gray has a good song. Let's see what DJ JG is gonna run for us here.
Yeah, there have been so many attempts that have had fits and starts with that and failed. We are going to get it right at some point. I hope it's right now. But you know what? It's, we'll keep throwing spaghetti to the wall until we figure that one out. That's something that it's a big goal.
I love it. And what's fun is, like, we'll have a lot of games where we're winning, so it'll be fun to figure it out.
It will be fun to figure out. And, and now we got the fur creature coming, so we're excited about Hoosier as well.
Yeah. Last question I'll ask, is there a place where Hoosier is going to be housed? We'll do a little alliteration there. Like, is there a place for Hoosier to be, like a cage or something? Like, I mean, obviously I know it's not a real bison, but like, is there going to be like a Hoosier huddle place, or is he just going to be in and around the stadium?
So we're giving Hoosier a vehicle. I think people are going to like the entrance of Hoosier. I also think there's going to be some nostalgic elements to Hoosier's entrance. Think those old digital videos from the past. We might be repurposing those in an inventive way. He will have a general area where he's going to be standing most of the time. So, we're really excited about it. And, the reveal of the Bison went way better than we ever expected. We talked to a lot of Bison programs, even the Cubs. We expected a 50-50 reaction to the Bison. It felt like it was 95-5. Yeah. We got the 50-50 reaction when the website just launched 2 weeks ago. A lot of people don't like the design of it. There are about 39 more logos that are coming out. We just had to speed rush that through the licensing office in order to have something for the first game day. But nonetheless, I take the fans seriously on that. I think people are going to love the suit, and I think they're going to love the routine. The other mascots at Mascot Camp apparently thought it was awesome. So I don't know. Purdue Pete endorses it, so we'll see it. And Sparty and Goldie apparently thinks it's cool. So we'll see what the fans think of Hoosier.
I can only imagine what Mascot Camp is like to the uninitiated.
Well, I'm assuming it's like
a lot of weightlifting and enthusiasm is what I'm gathering. Yes,
just basically a lot of it's like Richard Simmons, but like 80 of them, right? So
Body by Jake, like 9 people from Body by Jake, 90 people from Body by Jake.
All right. Jeremy Gray, Senior Associate Athletic Director for Indiana University Athletics. Good luck this week. Good luck this weekend. We'll be out there and looking forward to the start of the season.
Good work.
Never daunted. We brought back the Bison.
Done.